My name is Vivian Collins. I'm 38 years old, and I work as the head of legal affairs at a mid-sized investment firm in Portland, Oregon. It's not glamorous, but it's steady ethical work, quiet and complex, just the way I like it. I live alone in a townhouse I bought 8 years ago, nearly paid off, decorated in warm earth tones and soft textures. Everything in my life is measured, reliable, accountable. At least it used to be. Thanksgiving used to be the only holiday I looked forward to. But last year changed everything. 3 days before Thanksgiving, my mother texted me saying she was heartbroken, but the family couldn't host this year. Money was too tight. The roof needed repairs, she said. The heating system broke down. Caleb, my younger brother, had just lost another freelance gig. And Melissa, my younger sister, apparently was struggling with mental fatigue. Mom wrote, "Maybe it's better if we all lay low this year. We'll make it up next time, sweetheart." I didn't argue. I understood. Or rather, I thought I did. I didn't ask if I could help. I'd already wired $800 earlier that month when Caleb claimed they needed urgent repairs to avoid water damage. I didn't ask for proof. I never do. So I stayed home. I cooked a small dinner for myself. Turkey breast cranberry sauce from a jar, stuffing from a box. I lit a candle. I tried to be grateful. I told myself that solitude didn't mean loneliness. But then while scrolling through Instagram on my phone, I saw it. Caleb was live. I froze. For a second, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe he forgot to turn off an old live stream. Maybe it was something recycled from a previous year. But no, the timestamp was current. He was in our parents' living room. The room had changed. New drapes, a fresh coat of paint, warm lighting, golden ribbons, and a full Thanksgiving table. Roasted turkey, glazed ham, multiple pies, trays of charcuterie, and wine bottles that looked suspiciously imported. People filled the house, family, neighbors, even some people I didn't recognize. Everyone was laughing, smiling, eating. My mother, in a maroon dress and gold earrings, stood at the center, like a gracious host. My father, supposedly recovering from sciatica, danced next to the fireplace with a glass of wine in one hand. Melissa moved through the crowd with her phone, laughing, spinning, clearly tipsy. I stared at the screen. In my tiny kitchen, my plate of food had gone cold. I told myself maybe they invited friends to make up for not celebrating properly. Maybe it was a last-minute decision. Maybe someone else paid. Maybe then Melissa brought the camera close to her face and winked. Melissa leaned toward the phone and lowered her voice, but not enough to hide the mischief in her tone. "Shh, don't tell Vivian. Let her think we're broke." Laughter erupted in the background, real hearty, unbothered laughter. Someone shouted, "As long as her money keeps showing up, she can think whatever she wants." I didn't blink. My thumb hovered over the screen. My hand trembled, but not from rage, from clarity. In a matter of seconds, the truth unfolded like a blade. They hadn't just excluded me. They'd orchestrated it. I closed the live stream. Silence collapsed around me. I looked at the untouched meal. The candle still burned. The wine glass was half full, like some mocking symbol. The room, moments ago warm and hopeful, now felt sterile. I stood up, placed my plate in the sink, and turned off the stove. A notification lit up my phone. A message from Mom. "Hope you're doing okay today. I know this Thanksgiving is a bit sad, but you know we're all thinking of you." And then, just like that, another message followed. "Also, when you have a minute, we're going to need another $800 for the rest of the roof work. Love you." I stared at the numbers. $800. Same amount as the urgent payment earlier. Same phrasing, same guilt-wrapped request. But now I had seen the truth. They hadn't skipped Thanksgiving because they were broke. They excluded me so they could celebrate on my dime without the obligation to say thank you. I didn't reply. Not yet. I walked to the window. Outside, the neighbors' homes glowed with warm lights and quiet dinners. I could see silhouettes of families gathered around tables, passing dishes, smiling. Inside my townhouse, it was just me and the echo of their laughter. I opened my banking app. I stared at the recent transfers. October, September, August. Every month a story. Every story a request. Every request money. I thought of how many vacations I had skipped, how many nights I worked overtime, how many promotions I hesitated to take because I didn't want to move too far away, all because I thought they needed me. But in truth, they needed my silence. They needed my guilt, my reliability, my reluctance to say no. And this time, they had gone too far. I whispered, "I don't fund liars." Then I opened the message thread with Mom, and I blocked her. For the first time in my adult life, I chose not to explain, not to ask, not to apologize. And in that moment, still surrounded by cold food and quiet, I finally felt warm. I've always been the responsible one, the steady one, the one who doesn't crack. Maybe that role started the day my father collapsed on the living room floor when I was 16. A minor stroke, they called it. Not enough to paralyze him, but enough to change everything. We didn't talk about it much, just like we didn't talk about money or pressure or fear. But I remember the day after he came home from the hospital, sitting in the kitchen with my mom, as she gripped a pile of unpaid utility bills. Her hands trembled, not from weakness, but from calculation, figuring out how to stretch pennies into survival. I had just been accepted into a scholarship program at Oregon State, full tuition, partial housing. It should have felt like a win, but all I saw in her eyes was panic masked with pride. "You're our hope now," she said. I nodded without hesitation. I didn't ask what she meant exactly. I just understood. So I got a job on campus. Then a second. I tutored high school kids during the day and worked the night shift at a campus cafe. I skipped weekends out, canceled spring breaks, and every summer I came home to help fix what was falling apart, whether it was the house or my family. Caleb was only 12 then, already showing signs of resisting structure. Melissa was still in pigtails, clinging to fairy tales and finger paints. I cleaned, I cooked, I paid for Melissa's summer camps and Caleb's new shoes, quietly, without being asked, because no one had to ask. By the time I graduated, I already felt like a provider, and not just financially. I was the emotional scaffolding, the one they leaned on when their own supports gave way. When Dad lost his second job after the stroke made him less reliable, I paid the difference in rent. When Mom switched from insurance to real estate and went 6 months without a sale, I covered groceries. No one said thank you exactly. But the appreciation came in different forms. Subtle tones, proud mentions to neighbors, a warm casserole left in my fridge during visits home. It was enough to keep me invested. Then came the years that blurred. Melissa dropped out of college 2 semesters before finishing, citing burnout. Caleb floated through temp jobs, then tried a startup with friends that ended in debt and silence. And me, I got promoted. I moved into my own place. I got better at hiding how tired I was, because I believed I had to earn my belonging, that I had to deserve my family's love by constantly proving my usefulness. And usefulness in our family was measured by how much you gave and how little you asked for in return. Looking back now, it wasn't just duty that kept me in that role. It was fear, a deeply rooted, bone-deep fear, that if I ever stopped being the reliable one, I'd become invisible. I didn't realize that invisibility had already happened. The first time I tried to say no, it wasn't even a full rejection. Melissa had asked for help launching an online art store. She said it was her dream to make a living off her paintings. She needed a website, branding, materials, supplies. She sent me an invoice totaling nearly $4,000. I replied gently, "I can help with a portion, but not all of it right now. Maybe we can find a budget version." She didn't respond for 2 days. Then she sent one line, "You've always believed in me? Until now, I guess." I still sent her $2,000. And later, when the store never launched, she never brought it up again. This pattern, this quiet guilt exchange, became a language, one I spoke fluently. Mom would say things like, "Families help each other," "Viv, who else can we count on?" Or, "We're not asking much, just a little boost this month." "We're trying our best." Dad more direct, We did everything for you. Don't forget who skipped meals so you could go to school. Each phrase had a weight like a hook dragged through my chest. I'd find myself replaying them hours later during client meetings in the car, while brushing my teeth, trying to make sense of whether I was selfish or simply exhausted. But exhaustion doesn't win arguments in families like mine. Caleb, whenever I tried to establish boundaries, would snap. You make 6 figures, and you can't spot your own brother a couple grand unreal. I began to associate saying no with betrayal, with abandonment, like I was pulling away from a lifeline even if I was the one holding it for everyone else. I remember one night I asked Mom, just asked if Caleb had ever tried therapy for his lack of direction. She stiffened. That boy needs support, not lectures. He's sensitive. Not everyone's built like you. That was the undertone in everything. I was the strong one. The one who didn't get to be sensitive. The one who didn't need softness, only responsibility. So I never asked for help. Not when I was laid off for 4 weeks during a company restructure. Not when I ended a 6-year relationship quietly and alone. Not when I began having migraines from stress. Because in my family, needing help meant you were weak. And being weak meant you were a burden. Ironically, I was the most burdened person in the room. But they never saw it, because I never showed it. I thought that made me noble. But really, it just made me disappear. Year after year, transaction after transaction, I gave them money and never asked for anything real in return. Not respect, not gratitude, not even a conversation. Until that live stream, until the laughter that wasn't meant for me, until Melissa's whisper. Let her think we're broke. That line didn't just break my heart, it broke the script. And I realized I had been cast in a role I never auditioned for, but kept playing anyway long after it stopped making sense. This wasn't love. It was loyalty wrapped in manipulation, guilt repackaged as connection. And for the first time, I started to wonder what my life might look like if I didn't owe anyone anything anymore. What if I let myself unhook from those emotional strings one by one? Not to stop loving them, but to start loving myself too. After that Thanksgiving, I started replaying every request they'd ever made. It was like seeing a puzzle backwards. Suddenly, the shapes weren't random. They formed a pattern, a deeply unfair, carefully rehearsed routine. Every month there was something. A text from Mom, a voicemail from Caleb, a half apology from Melissa, followed by a link to a payment app. And I, like clockwork, responded. In December, the roof needed emergency patching, or the entire house would flood. January, Caleb's car needed new tires, or he couldn't attend a networking event. February, Melissa was having a breakthrough and needed high-quality paints for a gallery submission. March, Mom had a tooth infection that her insurance didn't fully cover. April, the water heater exploded. May, the fridge broke. Each time the tone was urgent but intimate. Never demanding, at least not at first. Always wrapped in, we hate to ask, and you've always been so reliable. But if I hesitated, the subtext shifted. We're just trying to survive here, Viv. You're lucky you don't have to worry about the basics. Lucky. That word always made me flinch. As if the life I'd built was an accident. As if my sacrifices were just lottery tickets that happened to win. I started to feel like a living direct deposit, useful, quiet, and easily accessed. No one ever asked if I was okay. They didn't know that my migraines had gotten worse, that I was waking up with jaw pain from clenching my teeth in my sleep, that I'd been skipping therapy appointments because I was too busy, that I hadn't gone on a real vacation in 5 years. The irony, I could afford a vacation. I just didn't take one because I was afraid they'd need something while I was away. Even the way they asked became strategic. Caleb rarely texted directly anymore. He'd have Mom send the message knowing I was less likely to say no to her. Melissa would leave voice memos, her tone breathy and sad, ending with, "I hate asking, but you're the only one who gets me." Once, when I delayed a response by 12 hours, I got a guilt-trip text from Mom. "I guess we're just not a priority anymore." That's okay. Families change, right? I stared at that line for hours. I hadn't said no. I'd just taken a breath before saying yes, but even hesitation had become betrayal in their eyes. And in return, I never got updates, never heard how things turned out, never received a simple thank you, just a brief acknowledgement that the funds had been received, then silence until the next crisis. I remember one Sunday, Melissa sent me a link to a $420 online painting course she wanted to take. She framed it as a career step. I replied, "Can you send me a syllabus or show me your plan for using this in your portfolio?" She didn't respond. Instead, Mom called me 2 days later, her voice low and tight. "You're hurting your sister's confidence. She just wants to believe in something again." Is that so wrong? And that's how it always worked. Love wasn't unconditional, it was conditional on my compliance. If I helped, I was cherished. If I hesitated, I was the problem. And yet, I still paid. Month after month, hoping perhaps that my loyalty would eventually be reciprocated, that one day they'd surprise me with gratitude or responsibility or even just acknowledgement. But that day never came. Instead, I became a silent partner in their narrative, a character who didn't get a voice, only a function. Vivian, the reliable one, the one with the good job, the one who doesn't need anything, the one who always comes through. And when I finally stepped back just a little, they didn't ask why. They just leaned harder. Because in our family, the moment you stopped giving was the moment you stopped mattering. And I was beginning to realize I hadn't mattered to them as a person in a very long time. It started with a bounce payment notification. I had set up automatic transfers for a few of my own bills, utilities, HOA fees, subscriptions, but one afternoon I got a notice that my internet bill had been declined. Confused, I opened my banking app. There were no red flags. My checking balance was fine, but my linked savings account, one I rarely touched, showed activity I didn't recognize. I clicked through the statements, a series of withdrawals, small at first, then growing bolder. Gas stations, grocery stores, I didn't shop at, even a payment to a local beauty salon. I froze when I saw the transaction labeled Family Market $378. That was the store 3 blocks from my parents' house. I dug deeper and discovered something I never expected, a joint account I didn't remember approving. The name on the account read, Vivian Collins primary, Nadine Collins secondary. My mother had access to a savings sub-account in my name. Not only that, she'd been using it freely. I called the bank. The representative confirmed the secondary user had been added 2 years ago. They said a signed authorization form had been submitted via fax. When they pulled the scanned copy, I recognized my signature. Only it wasn't mine. It was close, convincing, but it wasn't mine. The edges were jagged, the tilt slightly wrong. Whoever forged it had studied my handwriting, but not perfectly. I stared at the screen, breath caught somewhere between rage and disbelief. I couldn't speak. I simply hung up the phone and sat still, listening to the hum of my refrigerator and the distant sound of rain hitting the window. I thought about all the times my mother had said, "It's just easier when we're connected, honey, or we're family. There shouldn't be all these formalities. This wasn't just informal. It was illegal." I opened my credit report next. And that's when the second hit landed. A closed loan under my name for $800 marked as paid with delays. It had been opened 18 months ago through a consumer lending service and closed just 3 months prior. I had never seen it before. The listed contact number was Caleb's. I felt the nausea rise in my throat as the pieces began to fall into place. He hadn't even told me. Not once. No apology. No explanation. And now my credit score had a small but permanent scar, just enough to shadow me if I ever applied for a mortgage or investment opportunity again. My stomach turned. This wasn't neglect. It was betrayal, deliberate, strategic, and shameless. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my home office, the screen casting a pale glow across the walls, and stared at the documents. I downloaded bank statements, screenshots of PDF of the forged signature. By 7:12 a.m., I sent a single text to someone I hadn't contacted in months. Donna Ruiz. Donna was a former colleague, a seasoned attorney, who'd once helped me draft a contract for a freelance client. She specialized in financial fraud and personal liability. When she answered, I didn't say hello. I simply said, I need to initiate a legal file family related, and I need to do it cleanly. Her voice, as calm as I remembered, didn't skip a beat. Tell me everything. So I did. I told her about the joint account I never approved, the forged signature, the closed loan under my name, the forged access trail, all of it. When I finished, she asked, Are you planning to press charges? I hesitated. Not out of uncertainty, but out of habit. The same habit that had kept me silent for years. That reflex to protect them, to absorb the harm without exposing it. I don't know, I admitted. But I want it documented. I want a record. And I want full control restored. Good. Donna said, This is the start. Whether you choose legal action or not, we'll make sure you're protected. For the first time, I wasn't calling as the dependable daughter or the forgiving sister. I was calling as a woman who had drawn the line, not in anger, not in vengeance, but in defense of something I had neglected far too long, my own name. The morning after I spoke with Donna, I brewed a pot of coffee and sat at my kitchen table with my phone in front of me. The house was still, the air sharp and silent, like it was holding its breath with me. I stared at the screen for a long time, rereading the last few messages from each of them. Mom asking for another $500 Melissa, forwarding a payment link for just a few things she really needed, Caleb's passive-aggressive silence. No apologies, no accountability, just expectation. They weren't wondering if I was okay. They weren't worried about what this pattern was doing to me. They weren't even pretending anymore. I opened a new group message, our usual thread, where they coordinated holidays and sent photos I never appeared in, and typed without hesitation, I will not be sending any more money. If anyone genuinely needs help, contact my attorney, Donna Ruiz. Her information is attached. Otherwise, please do not message me again. This decision is final. I didn't add emotion. I didn't cushion the message with soft words like love you or hope you understand. I knew they wouldn't. And more importantly, I didn't owe them understanding anymore. I reread it once, not because I doubted the message, but because I wanted to feel what it meant to finally say it. And what I felt was light. I hit send. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the read receipts popped up first. Mom, then Melissa, then Caleb. No replies. Not immediately. I stood, poured my coffee, and stared out the kitchen window as the early sunlight bled through the gray sky. The steam from the mug rose slowly, and for the first time in a long time, I noticed how quiet my own mind was. There was no mental math calculating how to move funds. No anxiety about an upcoming emergency. No dread over how I'd be guilted next. Just air. Just breath. My phone buzzed. One new message from Melissa. So we're strangers now, after everything I didn't open it. Then one from Mom. I guess we meant nothing to you. And then Caleb. You're cold. You always have been. Pretending you're better than the rest of us. Still, I didn't respond. Instead, I opened Donna's contact and sent her a simple email group message sent. No further engagement from my side. Please advise if they attempt any financial retaliation. Within seconds, she replied, Understood. I'll keep the case file active. You're doing the right thing. Doing the right thing. It didn't feel triumphant. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like detachment. Not numbness, but clarity. For years, I thought loving my family meant carrying their weight without question. I believed that if I just gave enough time, money, forgiveness, they'd eventually see me as more than a resource. But the truth was, they saw exactly what they wanted. Not a daughter, not a sister, a solution. And I had finally stopped being one. I finished my coffee, closed my phone, and stepped outside. The air was crisp, Portland's November chill brushing against my skin. A single crow flew overhead, its wings cutting through the quiet. I breathed in long and deep. It wasn't sadness I felt, not anymore. It was space. A new beginning without permission, without apology. And that for the first time was enough. 3 days after I sent that final message, I received a call from a number I hadn't seen in years. It was Ava Patterson, an old colleague from my first job out of law school. We hadn't spoken since she moved to Chicago, but we'd stayed loosely connected through LinkedIn. At first I thought it was just a friendly catch-up, but the tone of her voice gave her away before she even said it. Vivian. Hey, I just wanted to check in. I heard something, and I didn't know if it was true. My stomach tightened. She hesitated. Someone told me you've been having a rough time mentally, that you might be under a lot of stress and, well, not quite yourself lately. I didn't say anything. She continued cautiously. Caleb reached out to Liam. Remember him from compliance, said you were dealing with some financial delusions, that you thought your family was stealing from you. He said you might need someone to keep an eye on you. A chill swept through my spine, not from shock, but from recognition. They were rewriting the narrative, reframing my silence as instability, turning my boundaries into breakdowns. Ava added, I didn't believe it, Vivian, but I thought you should know. I thanked her calmly and hung up. The moment I did, I opened Facebook. I hadn't checked it since before Thanksgiving. There on my mother's page was a long post. Public. Written 2 days prior. Sometimes we raise children with everything we have, and they grow into strangers. Success can make people forget their roots. Money can twist even the kindest heart. We're heartbroken, but we pray she finds peace soon. Beneath it were dozens of comments. Distant relatives, family friends. Names I hadn't heard in years. Stay strong, Nadine. Sometimes they just lose their way. Maybe she's having a breakdown. Money isn't everything. Shame on her for abandoning you after all you sacrificed. The most ironic part, not a single person reached out to me directly. They all just nodded along, liking and sharing, confirming a story that none of them knew anything about. I was being erased and rewritten at the same time. To the outside world, I was now the cold daughter, the selfish one, the woman who forgot where she came from. The implication was always the same: something must be wrong with her, because heaven forbid the idea that something might be wrong with them. I felt anger stir in my chest, not a fire, but something colder, controlled. This wasn't carelessness. It was calculated. I was no longer useful, so they made me disposable. But rather than just accept my departure, they crafted a version of events where they were the victims. A version where they were helpless and abandoned by a woman, corrupted by money and pride. I wasn't shocked. I had always known my mother was skilled in emotional theater, but I hadn't expected her to take it public. Still, I didn't respond. I didn't post my truth. I didn't argue in the comments or message anyone to explain. I refused to enter the arena they had built. Instead, I logged out. Later that evening, I wrote down a sentence in my journal. When people can't control your life, they try to control your story. Let them talk. Let them whisper. The people who truly know me don't need convincing. And the people who believe lies without asking questions, they were never really mine to begin with. It was a Wednesday morning when my assistant buzzed my office. There are 2 women downstairs asking to see you, she said, her voice hesitant. One of them says she's your mother. The other may be your sister. I felt my breath hitch for just a second. Are they alone? Yes. I stared out the window for a moment. The skyline looked exactly the same. Crisp air, clear light. Nothing on the outside reflected the small storm forming in my chest. Tell them I'm unavailable, I said evenly. And if they insist, you can call building security. My assistant didn't question it. She just said, understood. 30 minutes later, an email landed in my inbox. Subject line, they left this. Attached was a photo, an envelope placed on the reception desk addressed to me in my mother's cursive handwritings. No stamps, no postage, just my name. The body of the email read, "Let me know if you want me to discard it." I told her I'd come get it myself. When I picked up the envelope, I knew exactly what it would contain. I didn't have to open it in the lobby. I waited until I was back in my office door closed blinds down. I unfolded the letter slowly. It wasn't long, just a few lines written in familiar ink. "Vivian, don't be angry anymore. Let's move past this. I only need $3,000 just this once. After that, I promise I won't ask again. Love, Mom." No explanation, no apology, no acknowledgement of what they had done. Just another request wrapped in sentimentality. I held the letter for a moment, staring at the words like they might change if I looked long enough. But all I saw was what had been there all along. A transaction. Not a reconciliation. Not an olive branch. Just a number. A price tag on peace. I folded the paper and placed it back into the envelope, then slipped it into the bottom drawer of my desk. They hadn't come to fix anything. They hadn't shown up because they missed me or regretted what had happened. They came because the usual system, the one where I received guilt and they received money, had stalled. And now they were trying a more dramatic appeal. It didn't feel like family. It felt like collection agents in disguise. I leaned back in my chair and whispered to myself, "There's no me without the number." Because that was the truth, wasn't it? As long as I gave, I was worthy. As long as I funded, I was family. But take away the deposits, the wires, the steady hand always reaching for my wallet, and there was no seat for me at their table. Not even on Thanksgiving. That letter wasn't a message of healing. It was a receipt. And I wasn't going to pay it anymore. I walked into the bank that Friday afternoon with a single purpose: to sever the last financial tie my family had to me. I had made the appointment days earlier to officially close the credit card that my mother had been using, one that was issued in my name under my credit and had, for the past 2 years, served as her quiet safety net. She had justified it early on. "Just for small emergencies, Viv. I'll be careful. You won't even notice." But of course I noticed. The monthly statements came in and the charges weren't small. Beauty salons, grocery runs, pet supplies, birthday dinners. It had stopped being about emergencies long ago. The bank rep was a young man named Thomas. He greeted me with practiced professionalism, walked me through a brief verification process, and asked what I needed help with. "I'd like to close a credit account that I no longer use," I said. "It's under my name, but someone else has had access to it." He pulled up the account on his screen browse, gently rising as he scanned the details. "Looks like it's been active with consistent monthly charges, nothing overdue but regular usage." "I'm aware," I said. "I didn't give permission for that usage to continue. I'd like to shut it down completely." He nodded, clicking through tabs. "We can definitely close it today. Do you want me to walk you through the final activity and transactions before we do?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, please." He pulled up the itemized statement and rotated the screen slightly so I could see. There were transactions from as recently as the day before: $124.56, online skincare, $89.30, home decor store, $220, spa appointment. My chest tightened. There was no shame in those purchases. They were everyday indulgences. But the fact that they were made casually without my consent under my name only amplified how routine this violation had become. Thomas scrolled further, then paused. "Actually, there's something else. There was a credit line advance approved on this account a few months back." "Was that you?" I blinked. "What kind of advance?" He turned back to the screen. "A cash advance, partial withdrawal against the credit limit. About $3,500. Approved online. Funds were deposited into an external checking account a day later." My heart dropped. Which account? He clicked, scanned, and rattled off the account number. I recognized it immediately. It was tied to my mother's joint checking account. I felt the blood drain from my face. He looked at me uncertain. Would you like to request documentation of the transaction history? We can generate a full report and mail or email it to you. No, I said. Print it now. He nodded and stood to retrieve the report. I sat still in the chair, staring at the desk in front of me. The pattern was no longer emotional or circumstantial. It was structured, rehearsed. They hadn't just borrowed from me. They had designed a system around me. When Thomas returned and handed me the folder, I accepted it without a word. Once we close this account, he said gently, the card will be deactivated immediately. No further charges can be made. Do it. He clicked a final confirmation and nodded. All set. I thanked him, stood and walked out with the folder pressed tightly against my chest. Outside, the sky was overcast, and the sidewalk shimmered from recent rain. I didn't rush. I walked slowly, deliberately, every step steadier than the last. I had always assumed their betrayal was thoughtless, born of laziness, entitlement, even desperation. But this wasn't passive. It was planned. They knew how far they could go without triggering alarms. And I had let it happen. Not because I was weak, but because I kept hoping love would eventually balance the scales. But real love doesn't operate in shadows. That day, I stopped giving them the benefit of the doubt. And for the first time, I gave it to myself. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Donna called me. I could tell by her tone that it wasn't just a check-in. We've received a letter from opposing counsel, she said. It's from a firm in Eugene. They're representing your brother Caleb. I let the silence settle for a second. She continued. He's filed a civil claim requesting reimbursement for what he's labeling as 10 years of joint family investments. He claims that you misled the family into contributing financially. And now that you're stepping away, they want a return on what they say were collective decisions. I didn't laugh. I didn't flinch. I simply said, they're suing me. They're threatening to. Donna clarified. It's more of a pressure move, but it's formal. They've attached what they call evidence. Venmo screenshots, vague text messages, even photos of shared family items. The narrative they're presenting is that you held financial control and failed to properly communicate spending outcomes. I breathed in slowly. Do they think I'm stupid? No, she said. They think you're afraid. That was the moment something inside me snapped, not with rage, but with resolution. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of their judgment, their gossip, or their need. I asked Donna to set a meeting. I wanted to look this absurdity in the eye. 3 days later, we sat in a sleek conference room in downtown Portland. Glass walls, neutral tones, a table that could seat 12, though there were only 4 of us, Donna and me, on one side. Across from us, a younger attorney with perfect hair and a practiced smile. He introduced himself as Matthew. No Caleb, of course not. Matthew opened a black folder and began with a rehearsed tone. My client is seeking reimbursement in the amount of $41,000, which he claims to be his contributed share, toward family maintenance and household items from 2013 to 2022. In his view, your recent financial withdrawal creates a material imbalance and breaches verbal family agreements. He slid a packet across the table. Inside were printouts, Caleb's banking transfers to Mom and Melissa, a few screenshots of text that said things like, I'll send the $200 for groceries now, or paid for the car repair Viv will probably reimburse. Donna raised an eyebrow and flipped through calmly. Matthew continued. My client also alleges that there was an informal but mutual understanding among family members regarding financial roles. He argues that you took on leadership, but didn't provide full transparency. He believes this sets a precedent for shared responsibility. I waited. Let him finish every word. Let the weight of the performance sit on the table like a badly wrapped gift. Then I spoke. My family doesn't need me. I said, my voice clear and even. They need the money I generate. Matthew blinked. I leaned forward slightly. Every dollar I gave was voluntary. Every single contribution came without condition. I never asked for repayment. I never demanded accountability. But now that I've stopped giving, suddenly they want structure. Suddenly I'm the one being unclear. Donna steady as always. Added your client's evidence shows no formal arrangement, no written communication affirming a contract verbal or otherwise. What it shows is a pattern of dependency, not a partnership. Matthew looked down. It's a complex dynamic. Family always is. No, I said, it's very simple. And it was. For 10 years, I funded comfort, not survival. Spa days, phone upgrades, dining out art supplies, debt repayments. I enabled lifestyles, not livelihoods. And now that I had drawn a line, they couldn't tolerate it. Because control masquerading as closeness only works if the puppet keeps dancing. I stood calmly gathering the packet. Let your client know this, I won't fund their fiction anymore. And I won't be bullied into guilt. As I left the conference room, Donna walked beside me in silence. Once in the elevator, she glanced at me and said, "That was one of the most composed refusals I've ever witnessed." I smiled faintly. It wasn't a refusal, I said. It was a release. The week following the legal meeting was strangely quiet until it wasn't. It started with a distant cousin posting a cryptic status. Some people forget who raised them once they see a few zeros in their bank account. I ignored it at first. I hadn't seen her in over a decade. But then another relative shared the post, tagging several members of my extended family. And suddenly my name wasn't being said outright, but it was being aimed. So disappointing when family turns into strangers over money. No house built on pride ever stays standing. Funny how the ones who preach independence forget who held their hands first. I scrolled through the threads with a blank face. Some of these people hadn't spoken to me since I was in college. Others had only interacted with me to ask for favors. And now they felt entitled to comment on my character, simply because they had a fraction of the story and a full appetite for gossip. The worst part wasn't what they said. It was how easily they said it, with no curiosity, no questions. No pause to wonder what might have driven me to take legal action against my own blood. I received a message from an old high school classmate, a girl I hadn't seen since prom. "Hey, sorry if this is overstepping, but I heard what happened. I mean, isn't it kind of extreme taking your family to court? We all have drama, but that's private stuff, right?" I stared at the message for a long time. My thumbs hovered over the screen. Tempted to explain, to defend, to provide context. But I didn't, because I owed her nothing, just like I owed the public nothing. But the pressure kept building. I started to feel cornered in my own narrative. My silence was being used as proof that I was guilty, that I had something to hide, that their version must be true, because I wasn't offering mine. So one night at 2:13 a.m. to be exact, I opened my laptop and started typing. It wasn't rage, it wasn't revenge, it was clarity. I wrote a blog post on a private publishing platform under a pseudonym. The title was simple, "The Price of Silence." I didn't name anyone. I didn't describe myself in a way that could be easily traced. But I told the story, all of it. I talked about growing up as the eldest, carrying weight I never agreed to carry, about love being conditional on productivity, about credit cards opened behind my back, loans taken in my name. And the moment I realized that I wasn't part of a family, I was part of a system. I described betrayal not with drama, but with precision. And I ended the piece with a single line. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep others warm, especially when they won't even say thank you. I hit publish fully expecting it to disappear into the digital void, but it didn't. The post went viral within 72 hours. People from all over the country, some using their real names, some anonymous, left comments. "This is my mother. I thought I was alone in this. Thank you for putting words to a pain I couldn't explain." Emails flooded in through the contact form. Women in their 40s and 50s, young professionals, men who had been exploited by siblings or partners, some heartbreaking, some angry, some simply grateful. No one asked who I was. They just knew I was them. And for the first time, my voice was heard not as an act of defiance, but as an act of connection. I didn't share the blog on social media. I didn't respond to the gossip. I let the anonymous story speak louder than my real name ever could, because the people who needed to understand did, and the ones who didn't. They were never really listening anyway. I wasn't looking for it. I had been searching online for a birthday present for my colleague's daughter, something unique, handcrafted, maybe art-related. One of the listings caught my eye. A painting. Mixed media. Abstract but familiar. Very familiar. I clicked and the image loaded slowly, my internet dragging just enough to stretch the moment. I leaned forward as the screen filled with soft tones of blue and copper, the exact strokes I had memorized 4 years ago. It was the painting I had commissioned for Melissa's 25th birthday. It had been a surprise. I'd hired a local artist to recreate one of Melissa's childhood sketches in a professional style, a symbolic gesture that said, "I see you. I value your vision. I believe in your talent." I had framed it myself, wrapped it in hand-stamped paper, written her a letter about how proud I was of her for pursuing art, despite the noise and pressure around her. She had cried when she opened it. At least I thought the tears were real at the time. Now it sat on eBay. Starting bid $65, description acrylic on canvas piece from the estranged sister who cut ties with our family to live a wealthy life alone. Sentimental value, but we need to let go. I read it 3 times. Not because I couldn't comprehend it, but because I could. She hadn't just sold the painting. She turned it into a headline, into a message, into bait. It wasn't about the money. It never was. That listing wasn't meant for strangers, it was meant for me. And it worked, but not in the way she'd hoped. I didn't cry. I didn't text her. I didn't rage at the violation of something that once symbolized love. Instead, I right-clicked and saved the image. Then I printed it quietly in black and white. I took the sheet and walked to my filing cabinet, the one I had labeled Family Archive Do Not Reopen, and slid it into a new plastic sleeve. On the front of the sleeve, I wrote in fine ink, "This is how they said goodbye." That file had grown thick in recent months. Screenshots of bank transactions, copies of forged signatures, transcripts from voicemail messages, even the photo of the envelope they left at my office. But this image, the painting for sale, was the final piece. It wasn't legal proof, it wasn't financial evidence, it was personal truth. It was the moment I stopped wondering if they missed me, if they thought about the good times, if there was even a fraction of regret. There wasn't. Melissa didn't want the memory, she wanted attention. She wanted sympathy from strangers. And maybe deep down she wanted to punish me for the simple act of walking away. But she couldn't hurt me anymore. Not really. Because you can't lose what you've already mourned. The grief had happened quietly over years. Over missed phone calls, over passive-aggressive texts, over every holiday that ended with me footing the bill and sitting alone in an Uber. The painting wasn't a betrayal. It was just the final punctuation. That night I made tea and sat by the window watching the lights flicker in the apartment building across the street. People moving behind their curtains. Laughter drifting faintly through the air. None of them knew my name, my story, my history. And for once, I found comfort in that anonymity. I thought about bidding on the painting, just to remove it, just to have the last word. But then I smiled, because I already had the last word. It was written not in dollars or gifts or silence, but in the decision to stop being defined by people who only knew how to take. Melissa could sell the canvas, but the story behind it, that was mine, and I'd already moved on. I met Carla at a Saturday cooking class hosted by the community center near my apartment. It was called Fall Flavors and Homemade Traditions, and I signed up on impulse after walking past a flyer on my way home from work. I hadn't baked in years, hadn't slowed down long enough to measure flour or peel apples with any intention, but something about the idea of being in a room full of strangers, hands covered in cinnamon and butter, felt like exactly what I needed. Carla was in her 60s with short silver hair, dark eyes full of quiet history, and a warmth that didn't require words. She was one of those people who didn't ask too many questions, but somehow made you want to answer them anyway. She stood beside me at the prep table wearing an apron that said, "Made with memory." As we measured and sliced, she moved with the ease of someone who had made the same recipe for decades. I, on the other hand, had already dropped an apple over salted the crust mixture and accidentally smudged flour across my cheek. She just smiled, gently took the salt from my hand and said, "You're not failing. You're beginning." It was the kindest thing anyone had said to me in months. During a lull in the baking process, we sat by the window while the pies were in the oven. She sipped her tea with both hands, like someone who understood the value of stillness. After a few moments, she said, "My son and I used to make these every year." I didn't ask, but she continued, her voice soft. "He passed away 5 years ago. Complications from a car accident. But long before that, we had distance. Things were said, money got in the way, and neither of us knew how to undo the damage. We let pride write the end of our story." I looked at her, surprised by her openness. "I'm sorry I said meaning it deeply." She nodded once. "Thank you, but I don't share it for pity. I share it because I know how it feels to carry the weight of unfinished love." That sentence stuck with me. I told her quietly, cautiously, that I was in the process of stepping away from my own family. I didn't get into details. I didn't say words like lawsuit or fraud. I just said, they took more than they gave. And when I finally said no, they told the world I was cruel. Carla didn't flinch. She reached for her tea again and said, "We don't get to choose the family we're born into, but we do get to choose what we carry forward." I asked her what she chose to carry. She smiled, eyes brimming but not spilling. "I carry the laughter from the nights we burned the crust. I carry the way he used to say, 'Too much nutmeg, Mom,' like it was a running joke. I carry the memory of him humming while he worked. Not the final fights, not the bank arguments, not the silence, just the pieces that still warm my heart instead of hurting it." I didn't respond right away. I just let the pie aroma fill the room while my chest softened around something I didn't know I'd been holding so tightly. That day, I didn't just learn how to make apple pie. I learned that forgiveness doesn't mean returning. It doesn't mean reopening doors or forgetting what was done. It means choosing what part of the story you want to take with you. Carla and I began meeting every other Saturday after that. Sometimes we baked, sometimes we just talked. She never pushed me to reconcile, never handed me platitudes, just offered a kind of companionship that asked for nothing and gave everything. One afternoon, as we packed up leftovers, she said, "The pain won't disappear, but the power it has over you will." She was right. By learning to forgive properly, not for them, but for me, I stopped letting bitterness write my ending. I started writing my own, with sugar and crust, and the kind of love that doesn't ask you to pay for it. And somehow, that felt like enough. A few months after meeting Carla, I contacted the public library in my neighborhood and asked if they had space for a free workshop. I wasn't a licensed financial advisor, and I didn't want to pretend to be one. But I was someone who had learned painfully and thoroughly what it meant to protect your finances from people you love. They gave me a quiet room on the second floor every Tuesday evening, a whiteboard, folding chairs, a projector that barely worked. I brought my own handouts and a thermos of tea. The workshop was called Financial Boundaries in Families. I kept the title simple and honest. I didn't market it aggressively, just printed a few flyers and posted them in laundromats, grocery stores, and the front desk of the library. The first week, only 3 people came. 2 didn't say a word. 1 left halfway through. The second week, 5 showed up and stayed. By week 4, we were a group of 9, sitting in a circle sharing stories that had never seen the light of day. Some came from wealth, others from scarcity. but the through line was the same: being manipulated emotionally, to give beyond their capacity, beyond their comfort, beyond their consent. I never told them exactly what had happened to me. I spoke in general terms, but they understood. You can always tell when someone's lived it. One Tuesday, a woman named Denise showed up. She looked tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. Mid-40s, a small notepad clutched in her hand, hair pulled back tight like she didn't have time for softness. We went around the room, and when it came to her turn, she said, "I'm just here to listen." No one pushed her. But halfway through the session, after someone shared about being guilted into co-signing a loan, she barely understood. Denise spoke. "My son's 21, she said. Dropped out of school, hasn't worked in over a year. Says he's depressed, which maybe he is. But he also plays video games 12 hours a day. I pay for everything. And when I asked him to contribute to groceries last week, he screamed at me. Told me I was a failure as a mom. That I owe him." Her voice cracked. "I thought love meant helping, but I think I'm being used. And I don't know how to say that out loud without feeling like a monster." Silence fell over the group. I stood up, walked slowly to where she was seated, and knelt beside her. "I'm glad you said it out loud," I told her. "It's not monstrous to name what's hurting you. It's brave." Her shoulders shook once, then again. She covered her mouth, trying to hold in a sob, but it broke through. I didn't give her a tissue. I didn't offer advice. I just sat there. After a moment, I reached out and held her hand. Her grip was tight, desperate, human. She whispered, "I didn't think anyone would understand." I whispered back, "I do." That moment wasn't about education or strategy. It wasn't about debt ratios or legal safeguards. It was about truth, being seen, naming the unspeakable thing that so many people, especially women, are conditioned to deny: that love is not a license for exploitation, that we are allowed to set boundaries even with the people who raised us or share our DNA. That help given under fear, guilt, or shame is not generosity, it's sacrifice. And some sacrifices are too costly to keep making. From that night on, Denise became a regular. She started journaling her expenses. She opened a new checking account in her name only. She practiced saying, "Not right now and then, no and then finally. This is no longer sustainable for me." Each time she said it, her voice grew steadier. Watching her heal didn't fix everything in me, but it reminded me why I had to keep going. Because the cycle doesn't end until someone names it. And I had finally found my voice, not just for me, but for others like me, sitting silently in library chairs waiting for permission to choose themselves. So I gave them that permission, every Tuesday, one boundary at a time. It came on a Wednesday afternoon, tucked in a plain white envelope, no return address, just my name in her slanted handwriting, familiar, but faint. I almost didn't open it. I held it in my hand for nearly an hour, just staring. Part of me was afraid it would pull me back into the undertow. But another part, quieter, older, was ready. Inside was a letter written on the kind of stationery she used to save for church thank you notes. Soft pink gold trim, neat cursive. "Vivian." I've spent months trying to figure out what to say. Maybe nothing I write can undo what's been done. But I want you to know I see it now. I see how much we asked of you, how little we gave back. And I'm sorry. If a day ever comes when you feel like coming home, please know my door is open. But if that day never comes, I will still understand. And I will still love you. Mom. That was it. No demands, no veiled accusations, just something soft, something human. I didn't write back. I didn't need to, because that letter wasn't a rope to pull me back in. It was a closing door gently shut without a bang. It was permission to stop running without the expectation to return. I kept the letter, folded it carefully, and slipped it into the back of the same file where I'd once kept legal statements and bank records and screenshots of old text messages. That file had a new name now, not forgotten, not feeding it, just free. Maybe one day I'll write her back. Maybe I won't. But that letter, late as it came, was a quiet acknowledgement that I hadn't imagined it all, that my pain was real, that my choice to walk away wasn't cruel, it was necessary. Sometimes forgiveness doesn't look like a grand reunion. Sometimes it looks like letting go without bitterness, carrying love without expectation. That's what I did. That's what I choose still. It was a Friday evening in November, right before Thanksgiving. I had spent the day baking. Real baking, the kind where flour ends up in your hair and your apron's more batter than fabric by the end. Carla had taught me how to make her apple crumble, and I'd added a cinnamon twist that made her nod in approval. The house smelled like nutmeg and rosemary. The table was long, not fancy, but warm. Candles flickered. Someone brought fresh bread. Someone else made roasted squash. We didn't talk about origins. No one asked where we came from. We just showed up as we were. Carla was there, of course, with her quiet eyes and knowing smile. There was Eli, a retired nurse who'd lost touch with his children, but never with kindness. There was Beatrice, who always brought too many napkins, and once taught me how to make soup from celery leaves. No one asked me if I'd brought money. No one hinted that I should be grateful or do more. They passed me the gravy and told me to take the biggest piece of pie. Halfway through the meal, Carla raised her glass. To chosen families, she said. I raised mine too. To peace that doesn't ask for permission. The room smiled, and as I looked around at these faces so different from the ones in old photo albums, I felt something shift. Not dramatically, just gently, like a boat finally steadying after a long storm. For the first time in years, I wasn't surviving the holidays. I was living them. I wasn't holding my breath. I wasn't waiting for the next demand, the next guilt trip disguised as love. This was mine. I leaned back, glass in hand, and whispered to myself, just loud enough for my heart to hear, this Thanksgiving for the first time, and it's really mine. Before we say goodbye, we'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Let us know in the comments. We read everyone with gratitude. And if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel. Not just to hear more stories like this, but to be part of a community that still believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Wherever you are, we hope you carry this story with you. And remember, sometimes the miracle doesn't knock on your door. It waits quietly until you're ready to open your heart. Take care, and we'll see you in the next story.